Today, we're going to be taking questions that lead up to the Shadbala course. So anything within the realm of the bhavas and houses, the rashis and signs, the grahas and planets, the myth and magic of Vedic astrology course, and then up through section 2 of the Shadbala course. We'll be able to speak to that. Now, I do have about 5 fairly intense questions which have been emailed to me to speak to. That could take a long time. We'll see how it goes. But if you have questions that you want to ask, as always, include them in the chat box, type them out in the chat box, and we'll speak to them as we go. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first question is, can you please explain Bhavat Bhavam again and why it's so important? I know we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth reviewing because it is a fairly important technique when it comes down to confluence. And again, the question is, can you please explain Bhavat Bhavam again? And I will share a screen here because I do have a chart that we can use. Actually, we can use any chart, but this is one that might be helpful to us. So what is Bhavat Bhavam? Well, it's often translated as from house to house. A bhava is a house or a place. And we usually read the chart, say, from the ascendant, usually, if we've got a good birth time. We figure out where all the planets are from that ascendant. And so, for example, the 10th house from the ascendant degree, that tells us what the person's karmic impact in the world is going to be like, or what they're going to experience karmically, what they're going to get engaged and involved with. The 5th house can deal with our creativity, our children, even our past life good fortune. That's all from the ascendant, the 1st house. Now, the principle of Bhavat Bhavam, this is when we want to get some clarity on a particular house. And this will actually tie into another question that we have today, which deals with, what is the best ascendant to use? The sun sign, the moon sign, the ascendant degree itself. And then a follow-up question that was, can you actually read the chart from any of the planets? And the answer is yes. And the idea of Bhavat Bhavam kind of leads into this. So if we are wanting to know, for example, more information or more details about the 2nd house, how one manages one's resources. And oftentimes I look at the 2nd house as kind of the root of how one will relate to their resources, because the 2nd house also has an influence towards early childhood and how things were presented to us and how we were encouraged to take care of ourselves to a degree, and how we were also taken care of, because how we are taken care of tends to impact how we take care of other people or other resources within our life. So for example, if we want to understand a little bit more about the 2nd house in those particular areas, we would look at the 2nd house, and we could, if we wanted to, actually read the chart from the 2nd house. Now, it's a bit advanced, so we're not necessarily going to get into it right now, but we do get into it within the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship course. But we want to look at the 2nd house from the 2nd house. So if this is the 2nd house in the chart here, Virgo, well, the 2nd house from the 2nd house is Libra. So we could look to Libra to see, is there any kind of confluence, any additional information which either affirms or denies what we have learned from our estimation of the 2nd house. If we want to know, for example, if we want more information about the 10th house of career, of karmic impact on the world, of our relationship with authority figures, our capacity to be an authority, then we definitely will look at the 10th house, but we could also look at the 10th from the 10th house. So in this chart, 7, 8, 9, 10, we have Taurus as the 10th house. We have Mars there in Taurus. And then we want to go from this 10th house 10 houses away from it. So we'll start at Taurus. We'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we'll get over here to Aquarius, where we have Venus, Mercury, and Sun. And so if we want more information about how the 10th house is going to function, we go 10 houses away from the 10th house. And this gives us more information. And so, for example, we see in this chart, we have Mars in the 10th house for a Leo ascendant, which shows this person is going to have a lot of positive polarity, more masculine characteristics, more logically minded, rational approach to their experience within the world. Again, assuming that Mars is working well, because these are all things that Mars gives. And so when it comes to career, karmic impact, and so on, Mars is going to have a strong imprint in that regard. Now, if we go from the 10th, or the 10th from the 10th, we're going to come around to Aquarius, where we see the Sun. Now, the Sun and Mars are very similar in some ways. They're both fiery planets. They're very dry planets. They're very good about getting to the point and following one's inspiration. And so we're going to see some confluence there, that the career, the karmic impact is going to have a lot of this fire element quality to it, because we go from the 10th, and then we go from the 10th from the 10th. We also have Venus and Mercury there. Now, what I would pay attention to a little bit more in this regard, Mercury is going to be important, absolutely. But we see that we have Venus in the 10th from the 10th. So a Venusian quality is going to be supported in regards to the person's career and how they interact with the world, their karmic influence in the world. Venus is going to have, in a way, a double kind of influence there. Why is that? Because from the ascendant, the 10th house is Taurus, which is ruled over by Venus. And then the 10th from the 10th, we have Venus in that sign. So what you can see, you can start to put together these ideas that we are going to have a very strong solar, masculine, pitta, logical, inspirational type of energy towards the career and how they interact karmically with the world because of Mars and Sun's positions. We also see that there's going to be a lot of confluence related to adding Venus into this, because Venus rules over the 10th house from the ascendant, and Venus is in the 10th from the 10th. Now, these are things that they add, how would I put it? They add additional details to your reading of the chart. And so when I look at a chart, I'm going to focus on the 10th house. Where is the 10th house Lord? I'm going to get a deep sense of what is going on with the 10th house. What are the Bhava yogas? For example, having the 4th Lord and the 9th Lord in the 10th. What do those Bhava yogas mean? I'm going to write these things down. And what does it mean that Mars is the ruler of the 4th and the 9th house? I'm going to consider how are planets positioned from this Mars when it comes to career and so on. But if I want to get a little more detail, like for example, if I'm looking through the Bhava yogas and I'm trying to figure out, is the Bhava yoga going to give this an influence of, say, following one's inspiration, being logical about their approach to life? Or is there going to be some kind of, are they going to be too impulsive? Because Mars is also a very impulsive planet. So if I'm trying to figure that out, well, what I might do then is look at the 10th from the 10th to see which way could it go. And knowing that the Sun is in the 10th from the 10th, I'm going to say this person has a tendency more so to follow their inspiration rather than to make mistakes because they're too impulsive. I'm also going to say that this person, if I'm looking at the Bhava yoga of, say, the 4th Lord, 9th Lord in the 10th, and I'm trying to figure out, is this going to be a person that is able to handle their peers? They're going to be able to handle the people, their colleagues, and so on in such a way that is supportive of them? Because Mars can be kind of dicey in that situation. Mars can be a very good leader at times, but also Mars can really put a person off. can make a person feel like they're being judged or criticized. They don't necessarily get along as well with their peers and their colleagues. Well, if I want to know which way is it going to go, then I might look at the 10th from the 10th and see that, oh, well, we do have Venus there, and Venus is ruling the actual 10th house. And we even have Mercury there, which is a planet of communication. Now, Mercury is getting fairly well sizzled by being almost within the same degree as the sun, but Venus is pretty far away from the sun. So Venus is going to give the capacity to have tact and some sensitivity, so that Mars might not necessarily ruin their experience within their career as it relates to dealing with their peers or their colleagues. Again, peers and colleagues related to the career itself. So the idea of Bhavat Bhavam, I think it's a very powerful technique, but when I use it, it's more to refine what I've already assessed from the chart, just reading it from the ascendant. But again, you can do this really from any area of the chart. Let's see here, what would be another good example? So we have in the 5th house, we have Saturn and Moon. All right, so this is going to show some difficulty with children. When Moon and Saturn get together, this tends to make a person sort of hyper fixated on what could go wrong or what is wrong. So when it comes to things like children or creative ideas, this person might tend to really not see the possibilities. They're not really an opportunity or an optimism kind of person. They're going to tend to focus on what could and will go wrong. All right. Now, it's just because we have this Lajatariya Vashta of Moon and Saturn together in the 5th house. Well, if I want to get a little more confluence, I can come around and go to the 5th from the 5th house. So that will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll get up here to Aries. Now, looking at Aries, there are no planets in Aries. All right. So there are no planets in Aries, which we could look at some Rashi aspects and so on. But what might be a little more useful is to consider what is the Lord of the 5th from the 5th doing? How is it situated? And so that is Mars. We see that Mars is in a friend sign. Mars is right in the middle of Taurus. And so Mars is in a Kumara Vashta, which can be very helpful. We can also look to see how Mars is doing with Lajatariya Vashtas. So Mars is doing fairly well. Let's see, the only planet that's really hurting Mars is Mercury, and that's not bringing Mars down to any kind of negative numbers. And then Jupiter is adding 211 points to Mars. Moon is adding 94.9 points to Mars. Sun is adding 302.3 points to Mars. So ultimately, Mars is doing very well when it comes to the addition of the benefit and the energies of the friends of Mars. And the enemy of Mars isn't really hurting Mars too much. So while we will see that there probably will be a lot of possibly criticism, but more so just a sense of not having optimism or seeing the opportunities for one's creative ideas and one's children because of this Saturn and this Moon. Because the 5th from the 5th, Mars is doing well, the Lord of the 5th from the 5th is doing well, this is going to show someone that they're going to be able to see the problems, and they're probably also going to be able to figure out what needs fixed, because we have to remember that Mars is, in a sense, the person who can fix things. He's what contributes to invention. He's what contributes to engineering. And what do inventors and engineers do? They look at problems and they resolve them. And this is actually a chart of a person who does that very thing. So it makes sense in this regard. And this information is coming from the idea of Bhavat Bhavam, which if we had not done that with this chart, we might have made some assessments about this person, which isn't 100% accurate. It'll be accurate, sure, but it won't be the full picture. So that's why I like Bhavat Bhavam, because it tends to help a person develop the full picture. Now, again, you might not have gotten to the Lajatariya Vashta section yet in the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship course. That's very possible. If you haven't, just be patient. It will come. And what I just did there with Logitatia Vash is looking at some numbers will make a bit more sense to you. Also, the questioner, when this question was brought to my attention, said that it's a bit overwhelming. And we again have to remember that in astrology, it is overwhelming because there are a lot of puzzle pieces. And again, what we want to do is focus on the puzzle pieces that we understand and hopefully build them from the foundation up. And then as time passes, sit with that which seems to stretch your mind and your consciousness a bit. I remember when I first started really trying to apply Bhavat Bhavam in a very useful way, I spent a lot of time just feeling like all the wheels and hydraulics within my brain were just spinning and running on overtime. But I sat with it and I kept looking at it until eventually it's as if, the brain cells caught on and everything linked together and all the neural pathways were there. And that was much easier for me to add Bhavat Bhavam into my techniques without being overwhelmed by it. But I don't use Bhavat Bhavam as a standalone technique in any way. I don't use it as a standalone principle. I use it to further refine what I've already seen from the ascendant. Okay, so as you're talking about Moon and Saturn, could you talk a little about Moon having low Kalabala? What effect is this having in terms of Saturn starvation, in terms of children, in terms of the 12th house matters? Okay, I want to put this on the back burner. That question is a good one, but a little intense for where people are, because we did just start the Shadbala section according to the timeline that we're using for these questions. So hold on to that, and we'll get to it at the end if we have time. Thanks, Fiona. It's no big deal. And it's actually a wonderful question. So if we don't get it today, I will set it aside and we'll begin speaking to it next time when we get together next month. All right, next question.